Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Becoming a Teacher podcast. My name is Carson Amstutz. I'm your host on this journey. This podcast, for some context, is for our teacher learning community class here at St. Louis University. I'm in my first year studying elementary education and on my path to becoming a teacher. And this is a project called our Biojourn that will continue and live on throughout our 4 years and hopefully beyond into my time as an educator. And so today, kind of as an introduction, we have some questions to tackle, and I'm tackling the very first one of what do I know and believe about myself. So in this first episode, I'm going to give some context on my background, who I am, why I wanted to come into teaching, where I've come from, how that's affected me, and what I want to be as a teacher. And then secondly, my values in education and what I believe about students. And so, yeah, hopefully this goes somewhere good. To start this podcast journey, I think it's important to talk about my background, specifically how it relates to the field of education. I think there's a lot that's come from the different places I've lived, who I've interacted with, that's made me who I am, and what I'm bringing or what I will bring to a classroom. And so, I think for me, the most important thing when I reflect is what inspired me to become a teacher. And I think growing up, it was always something I wanted to do. I remember sitting in second grade with my second grade teacher at the time and talking about how I want to be a math teacher. That's always what I wanted growing up. That was what I told all my friends. I'm going to be a math teacher. I'm going to be a math teacher. But I think that kind of desire was lost. And as many kids have, they have these grand desires of being an astronaut or I guess now being a TikToker. And then they go away and they find a real career. And so I just looked for other careers, I guess. I had a period of wanting to be a sports star, which I still kind of do. That'd be great. I had a period of wanting to be a film critic. But I think it was in probably eighth grade at a school in Panama where I lived, and we'll get to that, where I met a teacher who kind of brought back that love or that desire to educate. In eighth grade, I remember it's a big deal. I was going to be in Miss Meadows' class. She was going to be my eighth grade English teacher, and all I'd heard was scary things. Like she's very difficult, she makes your life tough, whatever. But when I actually went into the class, what I felt wasn't an anxiety to perform. It was this push to be great and in a positive direction. It wasn't like a pressure to perform. It was, I want you to be great, kind of a hard but loving approach. And it made me do my best work. And what I realized there is that, wow, I haven't felt this in my other classes before. Why doesn't everyone teach this way? I felt so motivated. I had the most fun in any class. I did my best work, potentially, even up till now. I think in terms of levels, that may have been my best work as a student. And so it really made me think, it's like, why is this not being taught this way? And I think that was kind of my first step in kind of rekindling thinking about education as a way forward in life. And I think moving from there, it was my interactions with a young child that made me think, wow, why didn't I just why don't I just think about becoming a teacher? About, I don't know, maybe eighth grade or late eighth grade, early ninth grade, I met this young child named Jose. Jose was a foster child. He was staying with some family friends at the time, and I met him at some of my sister's birthday party. And I remember seeing him, I think he was 4 years old. He was developmentally stunted. He, because of his difficult upbringing, had been kind of in and out of school. He didn't get the development a normal child got. But what I do remember is instantly being attracted to him. And so at that birthday party where I first met him, I hung out with him the whole time. I had a great time with this little boy. I remember seeing him smile and just that making me feel happy. And then so from there on, every once in a while, I'd go hang out with him. And so we'd go to the park and we tried to fly a kite and it didn't work. But That was fun, and we kicked around a soccer ball. I remember we went up on a plane, which was really cool, and got a little tour of Panama City. And I just remember every time I showed up, watching him as his life became stable, watching him develop, watching him grow up, watching him become who he could have been the whole time, but hadn't been given the opportunity to. And I remember the last time I saw him before I moved, he was, I think it was probably about a month after his fifth birthday. And I remember seeing him and watching him smile and speak full sentences with confidence, which is not something that he had done basically ever. It was very new to me. And watching this little boy have just the best time in the world, it was like, wow, that meant so much to me. I wanted to see more of that. And I think that really brought back that desire to become a teacher. It's like, I want to give students that level of comfort, that support where they can become who they were always meant to be. And I think kind of that experience was groundbreaking, but also kind of a look back into what I had always had a passion for that just hadn't been brought up in quite some time. And so after I left Penn, I was like, damn, I don't know if I'm going to get that experience again. And I remember thinking, I got to work with kids. That's what I want to do. I want to become a teacher. Beyond inspiration for teaching, I think that move that I mentioned earlier really had an interesting impact on me understanding what I wanted out of the teaching industry and what I felt like needed changed. And I think to discuss that, it's important to talk about my past and where I've lived, because I think that's had a pretty drastic impact on what I believe I bring to the education space. For just a short bit of context, I was born in the U.S., lived in Illinois for 3 years, Georgia for 4. Then I moved to Panama, lived there for about 8.5, and then moved back to the U.S. And I think what that experience gave me was a unique experience in different schooling systems. I've had the privilege of being homeschooled, going to a private Christian school, going to a private IB school, and then going to US public school for high school. And I think what that taught me was this system doesn't work correctly. I think the most pushed I've ever been was in IB. I found IB very compelling. When I went to school, I was challenged to learn deeper. I was taught in a global way. I learned about the world, not just my country, and I was taught through projects that compelled me to learn deeper, compelled me to learn more, and were also driven by my thoughts. And when I moved back to the US, I lost that. And I remember this deep desire of where are these projects? Where can I show my learning in a creative way that is meaningful to me? And I think what that, especially during college season where I started applying to college, it was like, wow, I want to change how this system works. I want to be the difference maker in allowing kids to free what they want to do. I give them the chance to learn the way they want to, learn what is meaningful to them. And in that, I remember I wrote some college essays about it, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to make a difference. And I think that's a big thing that I know about myself. Talking about that first question I talked about earlier is I want to change the system. I want to bring more global mindset, and I wanted to make learning student driven. I think that unique schooling systems experience has really made me understand, like, wow, this is something that needs to be changed, and I think I'm able to do it because I have such a great understanding and this great wealth of experience. But I think regardless of that, of knowing that I want to change the system and knowing I want to be a teacher, I still don't know everything about myself in this context of becoming an educator, and there's still a lot I would like to pursue. I've talked a lot about being in elementary education, and I think now the question I'm asking myself is, what do I want? What age group do I want? And even in that, like, do I want to be an educator? I know I talked about as young as elementary, middle school, I wanted to teach middle school math. And more recently, I found a passion for younger kids in elementary and through recent discussions, potentially even early childhood. And unrelated to education, I know that I want to be a therapist. I want to help kids. And so in that, there's a lot of questioning that I'm still doing that I still would like to kind of explore through this process. And I think this Biojourn is going to help me kind of essentially flesh out these ideas and help me understand what I value and what I want to do in my career. And I think it would be interesting to see, because even if I decide, maybe education's not for me, maybe psychology is for me, so I can become a therapist or a counselor. I think this will still help me in kind of explaining the reasoning and really delving deeper into myself, my values, and also others, and what I believe in students or what I believe in adults and what I believe in the communities I will be in. And I think that's the unique experience this podcast provides. I think after that background and kind of what made me want to become a teacher and what I'm questioning now, I think it's important to know what I value and my values of education. We have a class here at St. Louis University in the first year called Sense of Purpose. And in that, we're doing a project on our beliefs and values, the beliefs and value statement. And I've taken a ton of time to kind of think through what I value in education and students, especially. And through that, I had four kind of unique, specific values in education. I think I'm going to link the actual writing at somewhere in the description of this podcast so that I don't have to necessarily give context for how each one developed. But I think it is important to know what I value in education. So, first, I believe that every child deserves a safe and welcoming environment that both fosters learning and allows them to be children. This kind of came through as I talked about the story with Jose. He was not given a welcoming environment. He struggled early on because his family couldn't make ends meet. He had to go into the foster system. And while his foster parents were loving and he had support, he still struggled to develop. But as he got that support, he did become was able to develop fully. And I think I want, well, I don't think, I know I want to be a teacher that gives students that welcoming environment that they need to develop into humans. But I think not only that, I have this value that I think is very important. I think children need to be children. I think children are too quickly pushed to push for the best grades, to push for a good college, to push for that job, and to get into adulthood straight away. And I don't think that's how it should be anymore. We talked about it in a class, in our growth and development class, how the period of childhood has essentially expanded because you can't just go from high school to job and live successfully. And so I think, especially early on, children need to be given a space where they can develop as children. They need to be given space to be creative, to be passionate, to explore, to imagine without the pressure of grade performance or standardized test performance. And so I think for me, I want to have an environment that helps children learn, but learn as children and not necessarily as students. I want them to foster what they need to succeed, yes, but I think it shouldn't sacrifice their creativity, their imagination, their risk taking, etc. And so, in that regards, that's a big belief of mine. The second one I talked about was that I believe that every child needs to see themselves represented in the content of the curriculum. I'm a big believer in representation, and I think that's not something I've always been. It's something I've learned. I think it especially developed in my 12th grade English class. My teacher, Miss Salishi, we had a unit on representation that I found super powerful, and I love what I learned there about windows and mirrors. I think every child desperately needs both windows and mirrors. I think windows are super important because seeing into the lives of others shows that your identity isn't the only one, that you're not the norm, that there's more outside of you. And I think that's important, especially in a world now which is largely very hateful. I think that education in other cultures is important in showing students that look at all these different cultures that are unique, but they are just as special, just as important, and should be valued. And I think along with that, children need mirrors. They need to see themselves represented in content because seeing yourself represented shows that you're valued, that you matter, that what you have to say means something. And I think in that regard, that a lot of kids grow up without seeing themselves in media. And I think that's really just a terrible loss. And so in that, I think that children children really need to learn that they matter, and that their culture means something, and they don't have to hide who they are. And along with that, I think this is kind of a similar trend. I believe that every student deserves to be respected. I remember growing up and struggling because I felt like my opinions didn't matter. What I had to say didn't matter because I was young and I was a child. But I passionately believe that every child has something of value to say. And if they say something, maybe it's harsh because children lack a filter sometimes. Or maybe they don't know directly how to say it correctly because they don't have the grammar to say it. But what they say matters. And I think that it's a couple of ways. I think society improves when we listen to younger kids because I think they're learning a lot about a world where as you get older, you lose kind of contact to. And their world is a world. And I think along with that, every student deserves to be respected because it's important in their development. I think too many students go through high school, go through middle school, go through elementary school without being validated, without hearing that what they have to say means something. And I think in that regard, that's harmful to the child. I think we lose out on both important ideas from these children, but also these children hurt, and it leads to trauma because they feel like what they have to say doesn't matter, and they're scared to take risks, and they're scared to be creative. And I think because of that, we lose out on so much. And so I passionately believe that every student deserves to be respected and deserves to be listened to. And then finally, I believe that every student has unique strengths that need to be pulled from. Obviously, I think every class should be differentiated to meet the needs of students. But I think in that, we need to listen to students, hear what they have to say, and kind of mold the classroom around their strengths in a way that lets them use those strengths, but also helps them work on what they may have as weaknesses. And so I think in that regard, students have so much to bring to the table that needs to be brought to the table, that needs to be focused on and used. And so in that way, I think those are, I would kind of describe as my four biggest kind of what I believe about students. And I think kind of in that way, that's what I believe about myself also. This is what I know to be true. And I think what I'm interested in, what I'm excited for, is how those values will grow and what beliefs I will add after learning in college classes about kind of the specifics about research backed strategies for how to be a teacher, learning more about the development of children. And so I think in that regard, I'm excited to see how that grows. And hopefully, this podcast becomes something of a live, growing, breathing project that represents my growth through that. I think that about wraps it up for the first Becoming a Teacher podcast. I'm excited. I think hopefully that went well. It's an interesting, at least first test run on this kind of podcast format, this Biojourn, how I want to talk, what I want to talk. So I'm hoping it came out well. I think in the next one, we'll be talking about kind of what I believe about my students, their families, and their communities within this larger social context. When I start getting into more classes, I'm going to learn more about my community, learn more about their community, learn more about my students, and I think in there, I'll finally be able to tackle that part of the question and then future questions that come with this Biojourn assignment. So I'm excited to where this grows to, and hopefully it turns out excellent. This has been Carson Amstutz. I'll see you next time.